Hello and welcome to chapter number 14 of our Flutter course. As you saw in the previous chapter, we worked on the login view. Now we have a login view and a register view in place. What you also saw is that we did some very simple error handling for various scenarios such as email address already registered, weak password, invalid email, incorrect password or wrong password, I think it was called. So now we have two views in place. But we have two main issues to address here. The registration or the register view that we created still lives in our main.dart file. And the other issue is, as the caption here displays, is that the widgets are doing app initialization. If you remember from the code, there was this Firebase initialization API, invocation that we had to do. And since the login view and the register view are very similar to each other, they're both doing the initialization of Firebase. What we're going to do in this chapter is separate these initializations and make them one. That's the first thing we need to do. So we just have one initialization that's going to happen. And what we're also going to do is to bring the register view in its own file. So this chapter is going to be a quick one, unlike the other chapters. And I think that's kind of refreshing, to be honest with you. Otherwise, all chapters are going to be very long and very detailed. So with that said, let's then start with the first thing that we have to do, which is basically to move the register view into views register view. Okay. I'm going to see if I can bring up Visual Studio Code, how we had left it before. And I'm going to bring up strcpy, which is my Android phone running our Flutter application right now. So let's do as the caption says here. I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see better. Then go to your project or Explorer here in Visual Studio Code. If you're using Android Studio, you can go to the navigator there as well. There's a similar one in Android Studio. Or if you're using Sublime, that is exactly the same thing here. On the left-hand side, you can see the project structure. Then go to lib and then views. As we have the login view there, let's create a view called register view. So right-click here and say new file. And I'm going to say register view.dart. Okay, so then we have to, as the caption says, go back to our main Dart file and grab this register view from here. All the register view, including its register view state. Grab all of that, cut it. In Mac, you do it with Command X, and in Windows and Linux, I think you do Control X. So I cut that, and I'm going to then bring it into register view here. As you saw in the previous chapter, doing these things usually causes a lot of headache for your editor because I mean it's not a headache for you because we can easily fix it for us. It's not a problem, but it's just the editor that doesn't understand where all these classes are located at. So I've explained this previously in the exact previous chapter before this, so I'm not going to explain it again. So let's say command dot in Visual Studio Code and then say import material to fix all the stateful widget problems and all the things that all the classes that are stored in material Dart here in the Flutter package. Okay. Then we have other problems such as Firebase. So command dot import Firebase core to fix that. Command dot import Firebase options here to fix that problem. And we'll also have to import Firebase auth, I believe. And that is also fixed. All right, so now we have a register view here. Perfect. And if you see here in our main Dart now, there are lots of things that are imported which aren't needed anymore. So let's remove those. You can see these things are actually, you may say, okay, well, how do I find all these problems? Like there's lots of issues here, but had I not come back to the main Dart file, I wouldn't have seen them. And the way to fix that is to actually bring up your problems view here, and you'll see that there are lots of problems stated that you can go and fix those. You see print statements are here, and then unused imports, which you can clean up as well. So that's how you can use the problems window. I'm going to do that by hand now. Remove this and remove this. So we have a clean void main function here. All right. I'm going to do a hot restart just to make sure everything's working as expected. Then we have the login view here. Okay. So the next thing we need to do now is, as the notes, I'm actually going to go to my notes and make sure that I have talked about the previous point. So the next thing we need to do is to create a dedicated home page that does the app initialization. And depending on whether the user is logged in or logged out, or if the user is verified or not, then it's going to display the correct widget on the screen. Okay. So just to explain that a little bit more is that, I mean, I can say that you see in your main function here that when your application runs, you're telling it to go to login view. But why? Why are we saying go to login view? Why are we saying go to register view? We have no logic at the moment that says, well, are you logged in? Then show the login view. Or if you're not logged in, show the register view. So that's what we're going to do with our homepage. Okay, so imagine the homepage kind of being the manager of the different routes that your application can manage. So saying that, oh, if this condition, then do this. If that condition, display the other screen. So we need a homepage, and conveniently named is homepage. I mean, lots of other people may try to call it something else, like a route page or whatever. But for now, we're going to go with homepage because it's just so easy to understand for everyone. So let's then go in here and say we want to have a stateless widget, STL, and we're going to call it homepage. Okay, and I'm going to press escape after that. So now we have a stateless widget called homepage in our main Dart file. Now, what we need to do then, after doing that, we need to go in our main Dart file, and instead of saying login view, let's just say homepage. Okay. And if I press Command S, remember, this is not going to take any effect immediately because hot reload doesn't take into consideration any changes to the main function here. So you have to do a hot restart. So you'll see black screen right now. Okay. So that's that. So what we need to do now is to basically have some scaffold in our homepage because we don't want to display just an empty screen to the user. Okay. So let's go in here for our container. Instead, say we return a scaffold. Talked about scaffold in previous chapters, so I'm not going to explain that again. And let's go and create an app bar, which we've also talked about. Title, a const text, and say homepage. Okay. Control Command S in Mac or Control S in Linux and Windows to save this file, and you'll see the changes took effect immediately. All right, so what do we need in the homepage? We said that the homepage needs to initialize Firebase. It needs to first do that so that we can get rid of this code in both register view. You see this code, future builder, Firebase initialize app, and then connection state done, blah, blah. And also we have the exact same code in our login view. So there's a lot of code to write in every view that we're going to develop. Though this application isn't going to have so many views, maybe 6-7 views, but still, we don't want to do initialize app in every view and do a future builder. It's just a lot of code. So that's what our homepage is going to do. Okay. So let's do that. Let's go and grab this code. Excuse me. Let's grab this code with the future builder, pretty much maybe the entire build function, okay, from our login view. So go to your login view, grab the entire build function until its end, which is here, this parenthesis, okay, ending parenthesis. Close your login view, close your register view if you want to, then go and replace the entire override of widget build in your home page with that code that you just copied from the login view. Paste it right here. Now, we don't want the homepage to have any logic that has anything to do with text fields. This homepage we're going to use it for something a lot more noble. So you don't need all the text fields and all of these columns and your text buttons. So go to here where you're creating the column in connection state done and grab that code all the way from return. So if I fold it, you'll see that that is the entire return, and I'm going to actually delete it. Oops, it didn't delete the entire code. Okay, so I'm going to do it by hand from the return all the way down here to where the column ends. Okay. And instead of that column, what we're going to do is just return a text that says done. Okay. Just like that. So if Firebase initialization is done, it's just going to say done. And let's also change the text here and just call it home. All right. Now that we've done that, you can see we still have some problems with Firebase not being imported because I deleted those um, imports previously. So I'm going to fix that now. Command dot on Firebase and say import that, and command dot on default Firebase options, or control dot depending on whether on your Linux, whether if you're on Linux or a Mac or Windows, import Firebase options. And I'm going to press command this. All right. So now you'll see we have a homepage that just displays the word done here once the connection state of our future, which is initialize app of Firebase, is actually done. So hot reload, and you'll see hot done. Sorry, done is also displayed hot done. So I'm going to take that in my notes that I've talked about that. All right. The next thing we need to do in this chapter is to make sure that the user is not null and that also the user is verified. So under some rare circumstances with Firebase, such as when you haven't initialized your Firebase application using Initialize app, the user that is stored in the Firebase code or in the instance of Firebase running inside your application may actually be null. And we've talked about null in previous chapters where we talked about Dart and its basics. So you can go back to those chapters and watch those. So I'm not going to explain what null is again, but just quickly, null is simply said the absence of a value, in this case, absence of a user. So what we need to do in our application is to ensure that the user, the current user in the application is non-null, meaning that it should be present, and also that the user's email should be verified. Okay, so you may be asking, why is it important for a user's email to be verified? The reason, I mean, also, before I say why is it important for a user's email to be verified, maybe let's talk first about what an email verification is, and that whether you've already seen it or not. So in a lot of services online, if, for instance, you go to a website, even if it's a shopping website or Amazon or whatever, eBay, if you say, okay, I want to register a new user, and you say, okay, here's my email address, here's a password of my choosing. Once you do that, you will be logged into the website. They'll say, okay, if this email doesn't exist already, I'm going to allow you to register this. But then you wouldn't really be able to do so much with the website. You can search stuff, but you probably won't be able to buy things unless you've verified your email. And that means that as soon as you register for Amazon, for instance, then it will send you an email to the email that you chose upon registration. And there will usually be a link in that email and say, thank you for registering a user at Amazon or eBay. Click on this link to verify your email address. You've probably seen emails like that. So you could just go to your inbox and search for verify, and you'll probably find lots of emails that ask you verify your account with the service. So now now that we talked about what email verification is, let's talk about why it's important. Well, let's say that I'm a user and I want to use this application that we're developing. So I want to store some notes in it. Then I'll go and register myself under an email that I don't own. All right. So let's say then I register your email address with a password of my choosing. Since you haven't registered your email address yet with the service, I go and ahead of you and register your email address with the service, and then I'll just log in. Remember, I'm not logging into your email. I'm logging into this application with your email. Now I've taken that email. So if you then, who's the rightful owner of your email address, comes to this application and say, oh, I'm foodbarbaz@gmail.com and I want to register an account with this application, then it says, oops, that email address is already taken. So you'd be like, how is that taken? That's my email address. So that is the importance of email verification. What we need to do in our application is to make sure that whenever someone comes and registers a user using the email address and a password of their choosing, then we're going to send a real email using Firebase to that email address and say, hey, you just registered a user here. Make sure that you click on this link that says verify, blah, blah, to actually verify your user with our application or with our with our application's Firebase instance that sits on Firebase Cloud. All right. So what we need to do now is to go in here in the connection state done. You see, let's then check the current user. Okay, let's see if this current user actually is logged into the application. So let's say Firebase, and then let's say Firebase app, I believe it's called instance. Let's see, dot instance. Change log Firebase. All right, let's see if we can actually Google that together. Okay, so this is good for you to also see. Firebase Flutter get current user. We're probably going to end up on some sort of a Stack Overflow. And we'll have a look at how we can actually retrieve the current user. As you can see, the response here is from a user whose username is quite Deshukert Jr. I apologize if I'm butchering this name, but you can see that it's provided here for you that it says Firebase auth.instance, and using that instance, then you can get the current user. So let's do the same thing here. Let's say Firebase auth.instance and then current user, okay? Get rid of this screen on the left, which is our project browser, and I'm going to print this statement right here before we return the done text, okay? So I'll bring up the debug console, clear the debug console, and I'm going to say Command S. All right. And since we've made a lot of changes here, you see we created a home page, lots of stuff in here. So what we need to do is just do a hot restart. Basically, Flutter in this case wasn't able to really understand what we'd changed in our home page. So there were so many changes that it just couldn't handle. So a hot restart is the remedy there. Now you can see here, as we printed the current user, I'm going to do this so you can see more of the output. Going to bring it up a little bit. I'm going to increase the size quite dramatically so you can see it better as well. And I'm going to highlight the parts that were actually printed. So this is what Firebase, or this is what the print statement printed out for us. And this is user credentials that were created by Firebase. And if you remember from the previous chapter, I said that make sure before you come to this chapter that you have a logged in user. And this is the reason I wanted the Firebase instance in our application to already know that you're logged in, so that when we print your current user credentials, then as you can see, it says here's the email address, and then there is a property called email verified, false. And it says, are you an anonymous user? False. And if you remember from one of the earlier chapters when I talked about the Firebase setup, then an anonymous user is a user who hasn't really logged into the application yet. And Firebase is intelligent enough to understand that any user who comes to your application who hasn't logged in before, and their login information isn't saved in keychain or shared preferences on Android, then that user is anonymous by default. So if you didn't take the last action from the previous chapter and you didn't log into the application with your current user, then you will actually be anonymous here. So this flag will say true. But since we've already done that, we've logged into the application, then you'll see our credentials being printed to the screen. Now, this is the part that I was interested in, which is email verified, and it says false. So what we're going to do here is to say, take the user. So we're saying final user is Firebase auth instance current user. I'm going to decrease the size a little bit here, okay? And I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see it better. And let's go then create an if statement here. And let's say that we're going to say, what had I planned for it? Let's just say if user is verified, email verified, then we're going to say print, you are a verified user. And otherwise, we're going to say print, you need to verify your email first. Okay. So you see here, I'm so glad that actually we're seeing this error. You can see the entire error. It says, how can I scroll here? It says the property email verified can't be unconditionally accessed because the receiver can be null. Try making the access condition using ? dot or adding a null check to the target. So what this is saying is if you go to this user, move your mouse over it, if I can do that. Oh no. here, you'll see that it says user is an optional user. So what Firebase has done here is saying this current user property that you can see here is an optional user, meaning that, well, if something goes wrong and Firebase can't actually calculate your current user, for instance, if you've disabled anonymous users, which you can actually do, then Firebase will be saying, oops, null user. The user is absent. I don't know who this user is. So that is Firebase API telling your application that if you're using my API, then you need to handle this case. You can't just ask me if the email is verified because the user may actually be null. The user may be absent. So there was a great suggestion here. You saw here that says you can conditionally access that property using the question mark dot syntax. So let's do that question mark dot. But as you do that, you'll see you'll get another problem. It says, okay, you're asking me to compare an optional Boolean with an actual Boolean, because remember, your if conditions need to resolve into a true or a false. Um, so in this case, what you can do is to either create something called, for instance, if an intermediate variable, you can say final email verified, and you'll say that is equal to user optional access to email verified field, or false. You see, this is the question mark, which we've already talked about when we talked about Dart basics. So what you said here is take the left-hand side of this operator of question mark, which is a null aware operator. You say if the left-hand side exists, take it. Otherwise, take the value on the right. Okay. So now if you move your mouse over email verify, you'll see that is a Boolean. All right. Perfect. So you could either do that or get rid of this intermediate variable that you created here and literally just put the exact same code in your if statement, and that will work exactly as it did up there. So let's just go ahead with that one less line of code. One line of code less, maybe. All right. So if the user's email verified or false is true, which means that if the user's email verification could be read as true or false, and if it can't, use false. If the equation then in itself is true, then the user is verified. Otherwise, the user isn't verified. So let's do Command S there. Let's bring up our console. I'm going to change the screen layout a little bit so you can see better. And you can see here, it says you need to verify your email. I actually clean the screen a little bit and Command S again. So you'll see a little bit less information on screen. And you can see our print statement, which was here, got printed saying that, yeah, you haven't verified your email and you need to do that first. Okay, a lot of information, but maybe less than the other chapters. And to be honest with you, this is all we had to talk about in this chapter. I just wanted to display and show you that, or actually explain first what email verification is, why is it important, and that we are going to use email verification in our application, as you'll soon see, and how can you actually read that property from a Firebase user. Great. That was all for this chapter. Now, the next chapter is going to be a little bit different. You may actually expect a continuation of this chapter. You would think that we're going to jump right into email verification, but I have intentionally actually put a little bit of a pause in our flow, because this is something you'll have to do as a software developer sometimes, in that if you see something not kind of correct, something isn't working right, then you'll need to address it as soon as possible. And this is something we're going to address in the next chapter. The problem here that you may, if you're a seasoned software developer, or may not have thought about, is that we are just writing code on our computer. This code could be easily deleted by a malicious program, a virus, or if something happens to your computer, all of this could just go away and you'll lose everything that you've written. So if you're not coming from a software engineering background, then you may not know what Git and GitHub are. Now, I'm not going to scare you, to be honest with you. This is not something scary, but what we need to do is just to make sure that we have a backup of our code, and that's just common sense. Like, even if you're a designer, even if you're a music producer, even if you're a if you're a product owner, whoever, or product manager, you probably know that whatever you're working on needs to be saved somewhere safely. So if you have a Visio file, you're not just going to put it on your computer. You're probably going to make a backup of it. If you're working with Figma, that file is already shared in the cloud. It's sorry, not shared. It's already stored in the cloud. So it's very rarely that you will work on pieces of documents that are not securely stored in some sort of a cloud. And even if you're working, for instance, with a document, then nowadays there's also shared there are cloud solutions for storing your documents securely in the cloud. So, pretty much almost always when you're working on a user generated document or a source code in this case, you'll need to make sure that it's securely stored in the cloud. And that's what we're going to do in the next chapter. So we're going to talk about Git and GitHub. We're going to set up our GPG keys or PGP keys. How do you want to say it? And we're actually going to dive a little bit deep into Git and what it actually means and why is it good? Why do software developers talk a lot about Git? And as you might know, this course, well, not might, you already know, this course is about Flutter. But I couldn't help put this chapter in because I believe if you're not a software developer, if you're coming from another background, then it is my duty kind of to tell you about Git and GitHub and why is it important, how to use it, how I like to do very simple tasks with Git and GitHub. Um, so let's then prepare ourselves for the next chapter, which is going to be a little bit less coding. It's not really, we're not at all, almost not at all going to be working on the source code. We're mainly going to work with Git and GitHub. So with that said, I will wrap up this chapter and I'll see you in the next one.